So just what is the best method to master the fretboard? The conclusion that I've come to through my 15 years of teaching is intervals. That means the ability to have a root note or chord in mind, to find that root note in any spot on the fretboard and know instinctively the location of all the chord tones and available notes that exist around that root. Now that is a lot, and it's taken me many years of, let's say, semi-organized practice to get there. But there are many methods that serve as stepping stones. And in this lesson, we'll consider the pros and cons of what I consider the big three, and then I'll give you some guidance on where I think you should start. Just something quick before we jump in. Fretboard Evolution, my live masterclass series, begins on Sunday, May 4th. We'll get to meet up live each week of the next 10 weeks and geek out over a new concept and see how it lays out on the fretboard. Every lesson is recorded so you can go back and watch them as many times as you like. They'll never expire, and I promise you will come out of these as a different guitarist, or should I say musician. So come and join us. Find out more about the sessions with the link down below. The first method is triads. All triads have 3 chord tones: the root, that which names the chord, the third, which gives us the minor or major quality, and the fifth, which adds some stability. Triads are a great starting point because they show you the location of the chord tones around a root note. D is our root of the day, and so the open D chord is in fact a triad. Now, how you can start getting into the interval approach is to look upon that shape, go beyond the dots and think about where's the root, where's the third, where's the fifth. So my root is on string 2, the third is on string 1, and the fifth is on string 3. So to learn the other shapes, what you do is simply walk on up to the next chord tone on each string. So that gives us root, third, and fifth in that root position voicing. And then 3, 5, root, what's known as a first inversion. The great thing about triads is there's a limited number of shapes. That is it, because beyond that, we're back to the first shape, but 1 octave higher. And those voicings of the chord tones exist on the other string sets, but they're different shapes, so there's a little bit of work to be done to learn them. And once you can start seeing the triad shapes, then they become targets for your soloing ideas. So there are only a limited number of close voicing triad shapes you need to learn. They're great for creating rhythm parts, and the triads are the chord tones. They are the target notes when creating a solo. So in a sense, you can't go wrong. That, though, is one of the limitations of triads. It is the chord tone, so just playing those exclusively can become a little predictable and repetitive. And triads can be used as guides for pentatonic and 7-note scales, but that relies on learning other systems, which brings us nicely onto the next, caged. Triads are actually found within the caged shapes. Caged as an approach is when we take the 5 open chord shapes, C, A, G, E, and D, and we create bar chords from them. You may already be familiar with playing this D chord in a couple of spots on the fretboard away from the open position. We have the D on the 5th string, gives me that shape. We have the D on the 6th string, gives me that shape. These 2 chords are part of caged. We say this is an E shape because it resembles the open E chord. Right here is the A shape because it resembles the open A chord. So caged immediately gives you 5 different ways to play any major or minor chord up the fretboard. So we have bar chords and triads within caged. We also have many different what I call lead layers, because if you have triads or chords, you also have arpeggio shapes, pentatonic scales, and 7-note scale patterns. To take you through an example of that, if I have my D chord in the C shape, it looks like this. and we're going to see the different triad voicings. With that established, that gives me an arpeggio playing the notes of the chord individually. To the root 3/5, I can add the 2 and the 6 for a major pentatonic. And adding the 4 and the 7 gives me a major scale pattern. And as you learn this, the goal will be to know root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root 2, 3, 4, 5. The pros of cage then is that almost anything can be plugged into each of these 5 shapes in both the major and the minor realm. And once you put in the time and can see the different cage shapes in different areas of the fretboard, that's a huge help when it comes to soloing. It also breaks the fretboard into defined, manageable chunks. The downsides, that is an awful lot to learn. There is a risk that the cage forms get you into a vertical box pattern mindset. One reason it's important to always know exactly what you are playing to get the big picture. And perhaps the biggest gripe with cage is that it's not the best if you want to play fast, which brings us on to our next method, 3-note per string. As the old advert says, 3-note per string does exactly what it says on the tin. Scale patterns in which you have an equal 3 notes to each string. The perfect antidote to the potential limitations of cage and a must for all of you aspiring shred guitarists. The 7 scale patterns are formed then from beginning on each of the 7 notes of the major scale on string 6. That C-shaped scale pattern we saw falls within pattern 3, also known as the Phrygian of the 3-note per string, would look like this. These scale shapes have repeating 3-note groupings, which, when coupled with alternate or economy picking or even legato technique, allows for some very fast melodic lines. 3-note per string is great for building speed. It plugs the potential gaps of the caged system, and it allows you to move a little more fluidly up and down the fretboard. The negatives is potentially more challenging for those of you with smaller hands or less dexterity. It lacks the chord scale connection that caged offers, and finding the root notes in the shapes can be a little more demanding than perhaps the caged forms. So if you've worked through those 3 methods and diligently been learning the chord tones, the location of the intervals in relation to the root, that sets you up perfectly for this 4th method, intervals. Demonstrating a little how that might work. If I have my D root note in my D major, I've got a D root there. Now I know there's the 2, there's the 3, there's my 5th, there's my octave root. So I have pentatonic patterns. I have the major scale. I have triads. So it's that ability to be able to recall any of the other methods. The same will work for the minor form. If my root note, then I know there's my minor third. There's my pentatonic. There's my scale pattern. Arpeggio forms, everything being recalled just from knowing the root note. So if you're really desperate to build speed, then 3-note per string is obviously a great place to start. Otherwise, if you're looking to jam and learn songs or just be a generally well-rounded musician, then I think you can't go wrong with that method of triads, then caged, and then filling any gaps with 3-note per string. All that sets you up perfectly then for a study of intervals to that ultimate goal of being able to play anything you hear in your head on the fretboard. But the bottom line is, whatever method you use, you need to be able to anchor it to a root note. You need to know the notes on the fretboard. And to help you with that, I have the perfect exercise just right here.